Upper article published a very interesting article in 1985. In this article, it is reported that two different groups of men and women were subjected to a sociological experiment. In the first group, 58 female subjects and 49 male subjects were randomly selected from different social classes and from the age group of 20 to 50 years old. The only thing that was effective in choosing or rejecting the studied subject was sexual orientation and history of visiting public centers. In this way, the researchers accepted a subject who must have a straight sexual orientation and also have an appointment to visit a public center, such as a library, medical centers, etc., within the next 10 days. Of course, they did not inform the applicants of taking the exam about 2 cases, so that they can honestly complete the registration forms. The second study group consisted of 46 women and 44 men with the same conditions as before. In this interesting experiment, the researchers received the information of their study subjects and informed them that they was going to participate in a question and answer and collective behavior test. Consent to participate in the test was received from them, and they received a fee for completing the information forms. Although it was interesting for the participants that they received the full amount before entering into the experiment. But in fact, their test had started by filling in the same forms. They informed the test subjects that they will be informed about the place and time of the test in the coming days. The test subjects were happy to receive the advance payment and left the registration site one by one. In the registration forms, complete information such as the medical centers visited, the nearest time to see a doctor, the public places visited regularly such as the library, internet cafes, etc., were received from the test subjects with high accuracy. The description of the experiment was as follows. Without the knowledge of the studied subject, the researchers went to the subject's place, such as clinic, medical center, and etc., and coordinated the test conditions with the subject's center before their arrival. The description of the experiment was that the studied subjects went to a public center, for example, clinic, without being aware of the situation themselves, and there they only saw their same sex. They had to choose same-sex clients while coordinating in advance at the location, and all the staff of the center. In the same way, even the doctor himself or the library manager. After the subject entered normally, doctor visited all the center's clients to the attending doctor's schedule, and according to the relative crowding of the center, the subject under study waited for his turn in the center for about 60 minutes to 2 hours. In front of the door of the building, the researchers had already identified the car of the subject under study and parked a station wagon with a baby on board, sign in the back of car, and if there was an empty space behind the subject's car, they blocked it with another car. After the subjects spent the desired time with their same-sex population in the center, the researchers waited to check their behavior when they left the center. When the subject leaves the center, a parent, who is one of the researchers' colleagues, waits for the subject to come and sit in his or her car. Then he or her, depend on the subject, put his child's stroller in the station with great effort and time, and in this way, when the subject wants to take his or her car out of the parking lot, they delay him or her a little. The result was very surprising and far from the researchers' expectations. 46 of the 58 female subjects in the first group complained that they were disturbed by the father of the child who owned the station wagon while leaving the parking lot, and only 9 of the women got off to help the child's father tie his child's stroller. In other words, only 21% of the female participants agreed to participate in the social activity of helping the father of the child. The result of men in the first group was only slightly different. Out of 49 male subjects, 31 complained about the child's mother delaying them, 11 were indifferent, and only 8 of them helped the child's mother. In other words, only 16% of the studied men were willing to participate in the social activity of helping the mother's child. The results of the second tested group were even more interesting. Without any change in the type of test and the duration of delaying time in clinic of studied subjects, all factors were considered constant, and only the clients and personnel were selected as mixed genders of men and women. The result was that while the studied subject left the center, 32 women out of 46 women had helped the child's father, only 1 subject was indifferent to the incident, and 13 of them were helped the father. In other words, 70% of the women who participated in the test appeared to participate in the social activity of helping the father of the child. Regarding men of the second group, the results were almost identical. Of the 44 male participants, 23 men helped the mother, 14 were indifferent, and 7 complained of being delayed. In other words, 53% of the participants had come to participate in the social activity of helping the mother of the child. This difference in the results of male and female participants of both groups was later interpreted by the researcher as the cause of greater indifference in men. The researchers interpreted that the number of indifferent men in both groups was high, while in none of the 2 groups of women, indifference was seen except for 1 case. The reason why men, in some cases, chose the third option called indifference was interpreted by experts as generally men consider a wider range of values in their choices. The feeling of avoidance is much stronger for men than for women. Women mainly have a better power of choice due to various physiological reasons and are not very avoidant and will always choose one between 2 options. Later, in other experiments, it was found that women mainly choose one between 2 options, whereas if the options before men are limited, sometimes they may not choose at all. But this conclusion was a side result of the experiment that needed more research. The main result of the experiment was not the difference between women and men, but the difference between the first and second groups. In the first group, after interacting with their same-sex population in a limited and small space and for a relatively long time, only less than 1/3 of them were willing to help others. While in the second group, cooperation increased significantly, so that more than half of the participants who benefited from the presence of the opposite sex in that limited and small space were willing to help others. The results of this interesting experiment clearly showed that the presence of the opposite sex in the community will lead to an increase in the desire to cooperate and, as a result, a reduction in social tensions. While gender segregation will lead to a decrease in the sense of cooperation in the society and, as a result, an increase in social conflicts. This experiment was conducted in 1985, and the result of its social consequences were thought-provoking. And it is interesting to know that today, after about 40 years and with the rapid progress of humanity, there are societies in which gender segregation is a blessing, and they welcome gender segregation and even impose it on society. They do, and surprisingly, they look for the reason for the increase in crime in issues other than gender segregation. At the top of these societies, we can mention countries like Iran and Afghanistan. In these societies, even schools, universities, and sometimes even parks and workplaces are segregated by gender. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please help us to do our mission better by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.